The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Step outside of your comfort zone. See the world with a whole new perspective. Join us and experience the unexplained on the Paranormal View.
And welcome everybody right here to the Paranormal View on the Para-X Radio Network. I want to thank everybody for being with us here in the chat room tonight and those listening from around the world. We appreciate each and every one of you. If you are listening from somewhere around the world and you'd like to come over to the chat room, it's at where am I at?
Parax.com maybe?
Yeah, come to Parax.com and
go to www.paraxradionetwork.com/chat and you'll be right in there.
Right in there. And you'll be with all these wonderful people. So I got my tongue wrapped around my eye tooth and couldn't see what I was saying. Right. But if you got questions tonight, you can private chat them to Henry Foister, Ceiling Cat, and I don't see Jeff in the chat room.
Trying to stay online.
You can get either one of us, and we will get those questions right over for our guest tonight. And if you are listening from somewhere else and you do have a question, you can also send one to the paranormalview@gmail.com, and we will get those questions answered. Just put attention question, and we'll get to it. Want to thank everybody tonight. It's been a beautiful day here today. It's supposed to rain a little bit tomorrow, but that's okay. We have with us tonight Geoffrey Gould.
Hello.
And Barbara Duncan.
I'm here.
All right. And we got a great guest lined up for tonight. Ought to be a good show. Lots of information for you. So hang on, because I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions. Anything new, Jeff or Barbara, that you want to throw out there right now?
Let Barbara say her no first.
No, there's just not a lot going on. It's same old.
That's
Take
okay.
a picture taken and stuff like that.
There you go. Yeah, she takes pictures and just sees what develops.
Oh,
Whereas my written and directed short Bucky is being unofficially premiered Wednesday night if you're in the SoCal area, Los Angeles and Reseda, hint, hint. And it's at the Broadwater Theater at Santa Monica Boulevard, Vine, just one street west of Vine. And it's the 9 o'clock to 10:30 p.m. block of short films, and my film wraps up the evening. So it's $10 whole, which won't kill you, and it goes into the rolling production fund to produce other films, hopefully, if one of my scripts wins the next competition like Bucky did last year.
Okay. Wow, I heard some feedback. I do have one thing I want to throw out there.
Hope it was positive feedback. It
wasn't that kind. Do have one quick thing. If you would like to win a ticket to the Mid-South at Louisville, Kentucky, and I forget what the dates are. I think it's June 24th or 14th, something like that. I have to look it up. But if you'd like to win a ticket, send over to the Paranormal View at gmail.com and say you would like to win a ticket. I need your name, the address where you live, your email address, and you will receive a ticket if you are the winner. The first two people who sends it over, we will, and you don't have to be in the chat room. You can be from anywhere. First two people we get stuff from tonight will win a ticket. So with that,
And that is July 27th, 29th in Jeffersontown, Kentucky.
Right. It's right outside of Louisville. Well, it's in Louisville, really. So why don't you introduce our guest tonight, because we're going to have a whole lot to talk about tonight.
Yes. Well, our guest tonight is returning guest is a field investigator for MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, Preston Dennett, who began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when he discovered that his family, friends, and coworkers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. And since then, he's interviewed hundreds of witnesses and interviewed a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. Preston is a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and with more than 100 articles published on UFOs and the paranormal, he's the author of 18 books. Well, actually, more than that. Since then, and he's appeared on numerous radio and television programs, and he has taught classes on various paranormal subjects, and he lectures across the country, and currently he lives relatively near me in Reseda, California. So, being no stranger to online radio, welcome, Preston Dennett.
Hey, thanks you very much. Thanks for having me on the show.
So what's the total number of books you're on right now?
It's 22 and counting.
Wow, cool.
22 and counting. Well, this book that we're talking about tonight, Undersea UFO Base, I guess there's a large area between Catalina Island and up the coast of California, where a lot of UFOs has been seen, not just recently, but over the years. Can you pretty much go out there on the coast almost any night and see something?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but I do know that it's been producing, really high quality reports of not only UFOs but USOs, unidentified submersible objects, pretty much every year. I mean, there's a really good high quality case. I'm thinking that these are just reported cases, a couple a year at least, maybe 4 or 5. One in maybe 10 people reports their sighting. So we're looking at probably, 50, 100 reports per year.
And that's both underwater. I mean, are we talking about fishermen out there or sailboats and they actually see underwater lighting?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of UFO activity and objects over the water. But when they go into the water, well, you can't really call them UFOs anymore because they're not flying. So I would say the most common type of USO sighting, unidentified submersible object, is seeing an object actually go into the water. Now, a number of people do see objects coming up out of the water. It's very rare. I've only got a couple of cases where objects go in and out of the water, at least observed. But a lot of people who are seeing this stuff never see it come out of the water at all. It's just underneath their boat, or they're watching it from the shoreline, these weird glows in the water, which aren't, sea life of any kind. We can get more into that, but yeah, it's a very active area. I'm going to say, and I don't even think I'm going out on a limb here, that this is one of the most active top 5 in the world in terms of USOs. I don't know anywhere else that there's this level of activity, right? And I'm talking about, there's Catalina Island. It's off the coast of Southern California, 26 miles out. The Santa Catalina Channel, or more properly, I guess, the San Pedro Channel.
Yep.
But it's this body of water that lies between, Catalina and the mainland, stretching north to about the Channel Islands, Santa Barbara, and going all the way south, past Malibu, past Santa Monica, past Rancho Palos Verdes, which, sticks out there and is a great viewing place. But, down to Long Beach and, San Pedro, and really even further south down to, I'm going to say San Clemente would be the southern end, which is pretty far down there, but mostly in the Santa Catalina, San Pedro Channel.
Now, has there ever been a report of a collision between a boat and these USOs?
Yeah, actually there have.
Okay.
There's at least one good case, and it involves a group of about 11 people on a boat called the Hattie D. And this was back in 1964. They're heading south down the coastline, and they're up in the northern part of all of this, and hit something metallic. And the guys who were on the boat said they never saw it, but whatever it is they hit, it was solid and some sort of metallic object. It wasn't a whale or sea life or a log or anything like this. It sunk their boat very quickly, actually. They just got time to get into the raft, and were rescued by the Coast Guard. They insist that there was some sort of object that struck their boat. And what I find interesting about that particular case, it's the only one I have involving that's a verified collision with something unknown. In a number of cases, though, I'm going to say there's a good half dozen at least in just this area, and I've got others elsewhere. These USOs actually target boaters. They come right for them. And this can be above the boat. There's a few cases of that where people will see an object and it comes zooming over and hovers over their boat. But more often, it targets their boat from underwater. I mean, a perfect example would be what happened to this senior electronics engineer who had his fully equipped boat out there in the Channel Island area, south of there. This was back in the mid-1980s. And it's at night. It's a foggy night. He's going along when he sees this green light ahead of him. And he doesn't recognize any conventional lights, no running lights, or, boats are supposed to have certain lights on which tell you which direction they're passing on the right or left. And there was none of that, just this very bright green glow. So he stops his boat, not wanting to have a collision, and darned if this thing doesn't head right towards him. And he starts to get really nervous because he realizes this thing's actually underwater. And this thing comes right up under his boat and stops. And he says it was one of the most terrifying experiences of his life because at this point, all the electronics on his boat failed. And his compasses were slowly spinning. And one actually, broke. It fell off its mountings. He's not even sure how that can happen. He estimates this object was much larger than his boat, perhaps 200 feet across, maybe 100 feet down. He couldn't tell because all his instrumentation wasn't working. But scared the living daylights out of him, stayed there for just a few moments, and finally moved off. And this was not a submarine. This was not a jellyfish.
But you bring up a good point about a lot of sea animals out there. I mean, that is on a whale trek. Has there been any studies done, or have you seen any correlation with how sea life responds to these USOs?
No, I have really no solid information on that. There was one case involving a sighting, at which time the dolphins in the area were acting very strangely. There was a lot of dolphin activity, and the witness thought there might be a correlation there. Some people have tried to tie their sightings to sea life unsuccessfully because they realized, what they saw was much too large or it had multicolored lights on it. But we know UFOs are collecting animal life. We've seen many cases of them, collecting cows and chickens and all kinds of animals, both domesticated and within the wild. They're collecting plants as well, and we know most of the life on our planet, the biosphere, is actually in oceans. So it makes perfect sense that they would be in there, and I would be surprised if they haven't, abducted dolphins and whales even and all kinds of sea life, because that's what they do. So that might be part of the draw for them. I'm totally speculating, but don't really have a whole lot of information. There was one really interesting case where this guy was in the Santa Barbara area, and he was in a boat off the coast and started seeing what he thought were whales. until one got close. He saw them darting around under his boat, and he's like, this is really odd. What is this? And one came up, and it wasn't a whale. It wasn't sea life at all. It was a disc-type object, or a half-disc, gray, and just scooting along there really fast. Was not life. It was a craft, is how he described it.
Wow. It makes you kind of wonder, because I know that whales do respond to different sounds. And if they're making any sound underwater. I don't even remember a lot of noise that they make when they're UFOs.
Yeah, as far as I know, I don't have a lot of cases of USOs making any noise really at all. There's
not even awake in the water.
A few,
Okay.
but by and large, no. They just dive into the water, and there's nary a splash. It just kind of tucks in there, and same way coming out. In most cases. Now there was a case up on in Northern California, where 2 teenagers saw an object come out of the water, and it did make a splash. It brought out quite a bit of water with it. And there was another incident like that right here off Venice Beach. This was during June 14th, 1992. There was a huge wave of sightings. Huge. I wrote a book about it, UFOs over Topanga Canyon. And on that one night, there was like 30 witnesses in varying locations, all up and down the coast here in the Santa Monica Mountains, seeing stuff. Some were chased in their cars. Some were woken up in their homes by objects hovering over their house. Some saw multiple objects, 3, 4, 10 or 20 in one case. And in one case, a couple saw, it started out early in the evening. They went outside because they saw flashes of light, and they watched about 10 objects rise up from behind a ridge down by the ocean. And normally, when someone sees UFOs, they come swooping down out of the sky above you. But no, this is really weird. And this is one of the things that really had me scratching my head. These were coming from below. And this happened again. There was another group of objects coming up and went behind the ridge, about 5 or 10, maybe 20. And what happened the third time, they started to count them. So this went on maybe 20 times, went on all night long till about 11, till they finally went inside and didn't look anymore, because they had counted, or the wife rather, had counted 200 objects. And the husband, I interviewed them both. I went up to their house. He's like, well, I think maybe there was 100. And I bust out laughing, because to me 100 is still way too many. And they were
That's a lot.
right?
Yeah.
It freaked them out.
That's a battle fleet.
That's what they thought. They called the police. They're like, what is going on? And it was on that evening where someone else I talked to much later was down by the beach. And he wasn't facing the water when it happened, but he heard this enormous waterfall, of water splashing. Turns around, and there's this giant object. He said it was about the size of a stadium. He couldn't really tell exactly how big. But it's up out of the water, and there's, the Niagara Falls coming off of it. And all the people there are screaming and going nuts as this object darts up to the north and disappears in maybe 3 seconds. And he says he got a pretty good idea of how big it was, because there was these smaller objects which were flying around it. And he estimates those smaller objects were maybe 20, 30 feet across, and they looked like little bugs next to it. So, yeah, he saw this thing actually come up out of the water, and it was huge. But when I heard that there were 200 objects, well, that's, I'd been scratching my head for a while, because there's so many sightings here in this one area. They've been going on since 1947, or actually to the 20s. I've got some accounts, all the way up to the present day. And I kept thinking, well, why? Why this area? Why are there so many USOs? What is going on down there? And then I heard this report involving, 200 objects. And I'm like, gosh, could there be a base? Could there be some sort of undersea base? Because where else would all these objects be coming from? So I started building up these data points, and those were the first two. The huge number of sightings stretching from years to 1947 to the present day in a very defined area. That's one. And two would be these sightings involving multiple objects. In some cases, 20 or 30, in some cases 50. And this just blows my mind, about 4 cases involving more than 100 objects. So, I mean, if there's not a base down there, at this point I'm thinking there's got to be a parking lot.
Well, it could be like a big starship where they carry a whole bunch of smaller craft like that.
Right, which would be functioning as a base. I mean,
Yeah.
either way, they're hiding down there, and they're hiding down there in large numbers because they can, and we can't get to them. I mean, not easily.
Right. Well, now, you've got some fascinating eyewitness accounts of UFOs in this book. I guess one of the questions I have, has the government ever investigated any of these sightings? And if so, what were their findings?
Well, not officially, but I did discover evidence that the government is certainly aware of it, at the very least, and are investigating it. There was one case involving a professor at Santa Monica College, and he was woken up one evening. This was during the Topanga Canyon wave around, the mid-'90s, and woken up by helicopters, goes out on his deck, which overlooks the canyon, Topanga Canyon, and saw all these helicopters sending their searchlights down, as if searching for something. Now, I had been tracking the activity, which was flaring on and off on kind of almost a weekly basis, and following each flare-up of activity, there would be helicopter activity, and a bunch of the witnesses were complaining about this. So out steps this professor, this college professor, on his deck, and he sees these helicopters searching for something with their searchlights. He's thinking, what's going on? Is there a drug bust? Is there a car chase? What's going on? And he sees this object that's much closer to him than the helicopters are. It appears to be evading the helicopters, and it's a perfect silver disc. He said it was actually like chrome, like almost mirror-like, just bright, shiny silver, and almost glowing. He wasn't sure if it was the lights from the stars and the homes, or if it was actually glowing, emitting a glow. But it's right at the level of the canyon, right below the mountains even, at eye level almost, and it's scooting down the canyon pretty quick, about 60 miles an hour, he estimates, down towards the ocean. So that was evidence, I think, that at least the local government is aware of this. Now, I talked to other witnesses, and I know the police are aware of this, because I talked to one witness, and he had major encounters and described how he went to a dinner party, and there was a police officer there from the local sheriff's station, which handles this area, and the police officer said, confidentially, that they receive hundreds of reports per year, 300, he said. And I said, oh, no, you must have heard wrong, probably 300 over a lifetime. And the witness is like, no, the officer said it was 300 per year. Well, I later talked to another witness who's describing this amazing encounter with this metallic disc and colored lights all around it. She lives maybe 2 miles away from this other guy, and this disc went right over her home. She said, you might be interested in this other story I heard. I was at a dinner party, she said, and there was a police officer there, and he started to describe how they receive like 300 calls a year about UFOs, reporting UFOs. I'm like, whoa, there's independent corroboration that, our local government is doing their best to deal with this. Now, I called the police, and they denied this. I didn't tell them where I got my information. But they said, no, we receive occasional calls. So they covered up, as far as I'm concerned, and I know for a fact that during that June 14th, 1992 wave, witnesses called the police. I've heard the 911 tape, and asked if anyone else had reported sightings, and the police denied it. And the witnesses I spoke with called the police like the next morning, also asked, and the police said, nope, nobody called us, which wasn't true, demonstrably. So that's not good. And I did receive further information in terms of the federal government being aware of this in a couple of ways. There got to be a whole lot of sonar research going on in this one particular area. And I thought that was a little peculiar. And it was so heavy duty that environmental groups actually sued the Navy to stop doing this sonar testing or experimentation because they were doing it in the Santa Catalina Channel. They were doing it in the Channel Islands, which is a huge marine life area. And they lost. The environmental agencies lost the lawsuit, and the Navy was allowed to continue their research, but eventually, due to increasing pressures, did sign an agreement in which they agreed to limit it and not do sort of sounds that would damage marine life. So I think they're aware of what's going on. I've got independent corroboration of that from another MUFON investigator who actually called up Point Mugu Naval Base, and they said, oh yeah, we're aware of the so-called rumors of this so-called base, and no, it's not true. Now, I have talked to whistleblowers who've said, no, it's true, and we can get more into that. But I do want to mention one last thing in this particular area is what is our government aware of? I was talking to one witness, and he referred me to another witness. And he told me that she was having regular encounters in her home in Old Topanga Canyon, and they were so intense that she was being visited by different types of ET races and being abducted on just regularly, that she came under government surveillance. And they got proof of her encounters and confronted her and wanted her to talk about them to them, basically give an interview. She refused, and they forced her to do it anyway. They forced her to testify about what had occurred to her. And now when she found out I wanted to talk to her, she was not a happy camper. She did not want to talk to me and never did, and was pretty upset I found out.
That's a problem with public record, So if she has to testify, that's public record.
Well, not necessarily. Not with this subject, which has all kinds of secrecy levels on it. So
now you got cases in your book here where there has been like multiple people seeing a lot of these UFOs at the same time. In 1952, you had 300 Boy Scouts on Catalina Island saw UFOs around 10:30 a.m. This was in the daytime also. It's on page 14, I believe, if you wanted to talk about that particular case.
Oh, yeah, such a great sighting. I've got a number of cases involving groups of Boy Scouts, too, and, of course, the troop leaders. That's just one of, 5 or 6 involving, this type of sighting. And Catalina Island, boy, that's the place to be if you want to see this stuff. It's just going on. I mean, that's the best vantage point. And they were at this one campground, which has had other sightings, and a bunch of them, like I said, 350 Boy Scout leaders see this metallic object right up close, by the way. It's standing on edge, and it's got a really weird effect where the sky right next to it, even though it's daytime, looks dark as night, as if there's some weird optical effect, kind of like it's folding space or something. I don't know. It's just, or it has some sort of force field around it. And it turns on, it's on its side, it turns horizontal, it moves around a little bit. It's in full view for, quite some time before it finally moves off. Now, they did exactly what you should do. Each of them wrote little separate statements and actually sent it off to March Air Force Base. And to their surprise, they did get a response from Commander Charles Viking, who ran March Air Force Base at that time, who basically just thanked them for the sighting, and that's about it. Didn't do any official investigation, which, to me is mind-blowing. I mean, this is an unidentified object right over a very large population base, and they're not going to investigate it. So clearly they were aware of the whole UFO situation, and we're already dealing with their own.
Yeah, it's not like there's not a lot of military bases down there too, because there's quite a few, correct?
Right. Yeah, there is actually. And the whole area is surrounded by military. There's Point Mugu Naval Base at the northern end. There's San Clemente Island, which is completely Navy, and that's right beyond Catalina. There's Seal Beach Naval Weapons Station down at the south end. There's LAX Airport, Los Angeles Airport, which is surrounded by all kinds of, technological installations. So there's a lot of military in this area. I'm sure what people are seeing. I've got 5 or 6 reasons why that what people are seeing, I think, is not military, for the most part. But yeah, there is a lot of military, and they've got to be observing this at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know of any military craft that can go from air to water and back again.
Right? I mean, that's exactly what happened to the steamship Aliki, a Japanese steamship, was off the coast of Long Beach in 1954. Saw this, what they thought it was a fireball. It comes gliding down and hits the water, and it actually goes underwater, stays underwater for a little bit, and then comes back out of the water and flies off. Not anything we could do, certainly not at that time. And yeah, I mean, it baffled them, and they're military witnesses themselves.
Now, doesn't a lot of these sightings start about the same time as the Battle over Los Angeles? It
was very close. I did find evidence of early sightings, and there was the 1896 airship wave, which started in California, coincidentally. And a number of these objects were seen coming from coastal areas. A couple landed on the beach. No strict USOs, as we think of them. But then in 1920s, there was a researcher by the name of Wishar Survey who wrote a book about California mysteries. And he recorded a number of accounts of UFOs, certainly over like the Mount Shasta area and other areas, and also talked about these objects that were seen on the water. They called them skyboats. This is what the Native Americans called them. And they didn't know what they were. These were intelligently controlled craft, which were seen on the water and then would take off up into the sky, and sometimes come out of the water and sometimes go in. And that was the 20s. Then the Battle of Los Angeles occurred in, 1943, I believe it was, or a couple of months after Pearl Harbor. And that also came out from the coastal area. They thought, the official explanation at first was these were Japanese airplanes. But they weren't. I've talked to witnesses firsthand. They said, no, there was no way these were airplanes. They were silent. One guy I spoke with had one of these objects come right low over his house. And he says, no, it was not a plane. And it wasn't a balloon either, which is another explanation the government tried to pass off on the people. But one of these objects stayed in place over Culver City for about, I'm going to say, over an hour, 40 minutes or so. And we shot at it. There was a huge blackout, in the entire city. We shot 1,500 rounds of ammunition at this object. There's several very famous photographs of searchlights being trained right on this object, which are easily accessible to anyone who wants to see them. And eventually this object just moved off back over the ocean. Now, the government denied it at first, later was forced to admit that, they continued to deny it until government documents proved that they were not able to identify what this was. And later documents have recently surfaced which say that we apparently shot one of these objects down. So yeah, that's the beginning of it, but it really didn't start occurring strongly until the modern age of UFOs. 1947, Kenneth Arnold, the Roswell crash, this huge super wave sweeps across the United States, and this is when the USOs showed up. one really amazing case, 1947, involved this object underwater in the San Francisco Bay area, and it was causing havoc with shipping lanes because it was like this disappearing reef, this phantom mountain, and the ships could not move back and forth in safety because this thing kept moving. They called up the Navy, and the Navy sent up Captain Hambley, who piloted this Navy survey ship called the Maury, and actually tracked this object south down the coast all the way to Southern California, where it went out to sea, maybe 100 miles, 200 miles out, and they found it there again. It was a very large object, whatever it was. It wasn't that deep because they had readings on it. And suddenly they lost it again and never found it. So I'm assuming that's when they started. I don't know when this base formed, but this is really when the activity started regularly on kind of like a yearly basis.
I was going to ask you, because to get that many ships underwater, it would either have to come in all at once, in which case you think that it would be a little more
apparent,
visible,
right?
Most people, yeah. Or if they came into the water and was traveling the water under the ocean for several miles, they were already in the water.
Right. I'm thinking both. They have the technologies to do this, and I think when they start to create, a scene, and they want to hide, it's the perfect place, while still having access, to us, to a large population base, which appears to be what they're mostly attracted to. They're here for us, abducting people. I think that they're very interested in all things human, and certainly in our planet, but mostly us. And they have the ability to move underwater, just like you see in the sky. I've got, most reports, these objects aren't moving that fast. They're kind of just chugging along there. But there's some where they are moving fast, maybe 50, 100 miles an hour. And I've got a small smattering of cases where these objects are darting around underwater at what appears to be, 500,000 miles per hour, just like, people describe in the sky, where these things go from horizon to horizon in 1 second. So, yeah, they can move very fast underwater. I think they've got a force field or something. Officially, submarines can move about 50 knots, 50 miles an hour, very close to that. I've learned that actually we do have stuff that can travel close to twice that, but that's not publicly known and certainly not official by any means. But it's my understanding that our Navy does have technology of submarines that can move fast, 100 miles an hour up to, and do have a flying submarine. This was something we were working on publicly. It's known. There are documents that prove this back in the 1960s. And apparently we were successful in developing this. What we've got is more like a plane, makes engine noises, but can, go up out of the water, unfold its wings, and take off, much like a seaplane, and then go back underwater. It's not officially known. As far as I know, there's no actual documentation on this. I learned this from, insiders and whistleblowers.
But even with our technology, it does make a lot of noise.
Right. So, I know that what people are seeing, some of it is probably military. There's got to be a small portion at least, because if there are military bases in the area and we have advanced technology, and the answer to both those questions is yes, and some of what people are seeing has got to be military. But there's a number of reasons why I know most of it is not. And probably the main one is that there are people being taken on board these craft, and they're not seeing military officials. They're seeing gray aliens. They're seeing praying mantis aliens. They're seeing Nordic-type ETs, not military. Secondly, these objects are putting on displays in some cases. They're chasing cars down the road. They're waking people up in their homes. They're abducting people. They're doing these incredible maneuvers over very densely populated areas. And this flies in the face of how our government, our military, behaves. They do not test advanced aircraft over population centers. They don't chase cars down the road. That is not, that's against policy, certainly.
One would hope not.
Right.
Yeah.
And thirdly, I'm going to say about 10%, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, of these cases involve objects that are being chased by military. And there's another 25%, maybe, of the cases involve military witnesses who are themselves utterly baffled by what they're seeing. There's way too many of these craft being seen. Perhaps our military does have some USOs, but do they have 200? And would they display them in front of people? I just can't believe that they would do that. It's been going on way too long. Back in the 1920s, our military existed, certainly, but we had just invented aircraft. We had nothing that can do what these objects were doing way back then and are still doing.
True.
And lastly, here's another reason why. There is too many different types of craft that people are seeing. We have lots of different types of military craft, certainly, but they follow a pretty strict pattern with, wings or rotors and windows and navigation lights and so on. Well, the objects that people are seeing have come in probably 100 different varieties. We're talking saucer-shaped. We're talking manta ray, triangular, V-shaped, spherical, box-shaped, hexagonal, glowing blobs of light, anomalous clouds with little pastel lights going around the edges of it, bunch of anomalous clouds. So all kinds of shapes that it's just way beyond, I don't even know how to categorize it. It's driving me nutty trying to figure out what's going on in this area because it's just so wide and varied.
Wow.
So, yeah, not military. Absolutely not.
Well, certainly not from our technology being aerodynamically correct.
Right. Or the propulsion either. Yeah.
Right. These objects are silent. I have no cases involving a USO that anyone can hear. There are a number of cases where people do hear UFOs in terms of making a low buzzing noise, perhaps. But that's about it. No, these things are silent.
Well, we're going to take a quick little break, be a few minutes. And Jeff, you still with us?
Yeah.
You've been awful
I'm
quiet.
fascinated.
Okay. Well, I'm going to let you take us out, and I'll bring us back and be just a couple of minutes. So go ahead.
Okay, you're listening to the Paranormal View on para-x.com with hosts Henry Foister, Ceiling Cap Barbara Duncan, and myself, Geoffrey Gould, with tonight's returning guest author and ufologist Preston Dennett. So stay tuned for more of the Paranormal View after the break.
Whether you're listening at home, at work, or anywhere, thanks for making Para-X part of your day. Your source for everything paranormal, Para-X.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Paranormal View right here on the Para-X Radio Network. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight, listening to us not only in the chat room, but from around the world. And speaking of around the world, Barbara, where do we have listeners from?
Henry, tonight they're coming in from all over the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom. Our little friend Unknown is back.
All right.
And Australia.
Australia. All right. We got them all over, just like what you said. I'm glad for it, too. Hope everybody's enjoying the show. We got with us Geoffrey Gould.
Hello.
And Barbara Duncan.
I'm still here.
And I want to welcome back with us Preston Dennett.
Thank you.
All right. Now, there's a story in your book that I thought was very fascinating. It's one of the, you might say, a little longer story in your book, but the story itself was really good and it involved a 11 friends, and it was called Contact at Blackjack. And there was an actor that was involved, and his name was Jonathan Fox. You want to tell us that story?
Oh, gosh, that's one of the most profound in the book for sure, and really affected me. I got to speak with a number of the witnesses, not all of them, because there were 11, and they were a group of young up-and-coming actors, writers, photographers, artists, real creative types. This was back in 1982, and they would spend, each summer a weekend on Catalina Island at Blackjack Campgrounds, which is actually right there on the top of the island. It's quite a hike up there. It's pretty isolated. And all 11 of them, it was a big thing they did. They would pick a theme and have this week-long get-together and party. They did it every July. And this year the theme was E.T., of all things, because the movie had just come out. And so they all brought, costumes, or one guy brought a little phone, a landline. Another brought star charts. Someone brought little blinkers, I forget what you call them, light blinkers. And
strobe lights?
Strobe lights, yeah. So it was, no sooner had they all, finally gotten there, and were settling in, putting their tents up and checking the area out, when this weird fog rolls in, and it was kind of eerie because it was very fitting to the theme. They've got the Star Wars music playing in the background and all this E.T. stuff set up, and they're kind of mentally calling E.T. And in rolls this fog, and right as soon as this fog rolls in, this light appears in between them and the mainland. And there's two lights next to it, and it's getting closer and closer and closer. And suddenly stops. They're maybe a half-mile away or so, and they become very concerned because they can't identify it. Now, some of them were pretty skeptical of UFOs, and none of them were quite willing to admit that that's what they were seeing, but nobody could. It wasn't a plane, wasn't a helicopter, wasn't a boat, a car. They were going through all these things until finally they're like, maybe this is a UFO, which really upset one of the guys. He became, angry and irate about it. He's like, this is not a UFO. It's something else. And this object moved closer, these objects, these lights. Some witnesses thought that they might see some sort of metallic object behind the lights. It was hard to tell. But they started to feel some real fear. The temperature dropped. They all started to shiver. At one point, they realized that they checked their watches, and all of them had stopped. Every single one person who had a watch, their watch stopped. And there was 3 photographers there. They're at the sort of edge of the campgrounds there, so they run back, get their stuff, they bring their flashlights, their cameras. Not one thing worked. Not one. Which, 1 or 2 cameras not working, okay. But not even the flashlights? No. This was insane. And
so kind of a mini EM pulse?
This is something we see. There's another case very much like this where people tried to take cell phone cameras. This was also on Catalina Island. Cell phone pictures of a very large wave of sightings. This was much more recently in 2016. And those didn't work either. So yeah, they'll turn off cars and things like this. They can control electromagnetic equipment. And they found that out in full demonstration when one of the guys who brought the phone, he brought the phone up and started pressing buttons. And darned if this thing didn't start beeping back at them. And that's when they were really starting to freak out at this point. It got too intense for some of the people, and they decided, you know what, I'm not doing this. And they're going back to the campground and ignoring what's going on because they're getting really scared. They felt like something was watching them. It started flashing lights back and forth as if communicating with each other, with each of these lights, or I think perhaps hypnotizing them.
So Spielberg was right.
Right? It was...
With the lights?
Yeah. Jonathan, he's like... we're going to get abducted. It's time, guys. Get ready. We're going on board. And upset some of the people who were there. And they're like, I'm leaving, and don't say that. It's not funny. But, I mean, he was really excited. He always believed in UFOs and was absolutely convinced they were seeing one, as for pretty much all of them. So the group splits in half, and half go, not quite half, but a little less than half, goes back to the campgrounds, while the rest is huddled there watching these objects, when suddenly it spits out smaller objects, about maybe 5 of them or so, which start circling the whole group. Now, the people down at the campground, they can see this too, these little saucer-shaped objects. And one of them got pretty close to Jonathan at some point, and you could see it had the little lights on it, a dome. It was looked like a craft. And they were circling around, whizzing around at right angles, getting really close to them at some points, and just causing complete panic. People were screaming. Someone was throwing up from fear. They were out of their minds with confusion at this point.
And this was before the popularity of drones.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
There were no drones at this point. There were, maybe little helicopters. This is 1982. There weren't cell phones. There was no internet. There was nothing like that. No public computers, really.
Yeah.
So this was, a big deal for them. And as they're watching these little objects darting around, suddenly they hear this deep thrumming noise, and it gets louder and louder. This huge, loud noise, and it's freaking them out. Jonathan's thinking, okay, this is it. They're coming. When right over the the lip of the island there, right close to them, it's military jets heading right for the other objects, which are still hovering there about a quarter mile away. And as soon as these jets appear, they fly right overhead, so close, he could practically see the pilot. It was like maybe 50 feet up. And the lights sink down into the fog bank and disappear. All the little lights flying around go away, and the jets fly off into the distance. And it's pretty late now. They've lost track of time. There's a distinct possibility they had missing time. The witnesses, by and large, deny this, though one did eventually undergo hypnosis, Jonathan, and ended hypnosis immediately because he started to recall seeing the ground from above and started to feel some real fear and didn't want to think about this experience in that way, which had been a very joyful experience for him. But yeah, there was an aftermath from this too. They were all nauseous. None of them ate that night. They didn't, a few of them didn't go to sleep. They had a lot of confusion about time. There was some paranoia. They felt very dissociated, traumatized. One guy never could let the experience go. He wrote this big treatise about it. Another guy became very depressed and reclusive. Jonathan became obsessed with UFOs. A number of them did. One guy would paint little UFOs everywhere. So one guy actually contracted a very strange disease and died, not terribly long after this, a few years, and blamed this experience and requested that his ashes be buried at the site or sprinkled, which Jonathan did. So, this had a huge effect on their lives. And 2 of the people ended up becoming super famous, one on television for a television sitcom, and another in motion pictures.
What actor was that?
I wish I could tell you. I know who they are, but I'm sworn to silence, and they don't want to speak.
Okay. Well, what genre of film do they normally in? Comedies or?
Well, yeah, one person was a star of a sitcom.
Oh, wow.
And the other was a leading actress in a number of movie franchises. That had multiple sequels. So yeah, you'd recognize them for sure, but they don't want to talk, and I got to respect that.
Yeah.
I did talk with, let me see, 1, 2, 3 of the witnesses. 2 Two, I got really long interviews. One a very, very abbreviated one, but I had access to some of their MUFON reports as well, because they did report their sightings to MUFON. And yeah, I mean, it's an amazing case. I don't know what exactly the full extent of it. I think there's layers that are still unexplored, but it's an incredible case either way.
So
Hey, you touched briefly on this, but I want to go back to it. And have you noticed a correlation with abductees and later illnesses that have become critical?
Not a huge one. It does happen. You know, I've looked into the medical aspect of this phenomena, but mostly on the positive side. I've been concentrating my research on UFO healings. I wrote a book called UFO Healings. That was my first book, actually, in 1996. And working on another version currently, because I've got over 100 more cases. So I've done a lot of research into that, and because of that, I'm aware that, yeah, there's a lot of cases involving injuries. Some severe, and certainly there are cases of people who've contracted cancer and things as a result. There's a lot of cases of people who have sudden migraines when a UFO shows up. Many people come away from, say, an on-board experience with scars on their body. And a lot of people feel like they're being, medically experimented upon, and there's some evidence to support this. Absolutely, and it's not always a positive experience. I think by and large, the ETs are not here to hurt people. That's not their agenda really at all. There's no evidence of them, say, torturing people for fun, sadism, that sort of thing, which we do, to our own people. But no, they don't do that. The worst you get is people feel like they're treated like a lab rat, and some people are medically damaged as a result of their experience, and some are also healed. So it's pretty hard to make sense of them. You know what I mean? And there's all extremes. There's an umbrella of behavior there that's very similar to human behavior, but it's skewed slightly towards the positive.
Mm-hmm. Any EM sensitivity?
Oh yeah, that turns up in a number of cases. Not in, in this particular complex of encounters that I wrote about in Undersea Base. No, but yeah, definitely interviewed people who've had that.
Are there freshwater cases too, or is it strictly saltwater, large ocean? Well, I guess you could hide a lot better than you can in a freshwater lake. But
no, there are. These. Doing the research for this was kind of a 10-year investigation, I have to say. It started with a chapter in my book, UFOs Over California, which I publicized by writing an article for Fate magazine called Is There an Undersea Base Off the California Coast? Because I was building these data points that kind of pointed towards this theory. And that got me on deep sea UFOs on the History Channel, which was hugely popular, and I got a call back from that and started speaking. So I just got a flood of reports, and most of them, I concentrated on this area, but a number of them came from across the world. I've got an amazing case I'd love to tell you about off the coast of the East Coast. But yeah, one freshwater lake case it was Lake Hamilton in Hot Springs, Arkansas. This is, quite some time ago, and
wow.
Yeah, not a big lake. I have to tell you, it's quite a small lake. And there's these four teenagers back in 1952 were on the lake at night. There was no one else on the lake. It was, not that big. And they were just messing around. They were in the middle of the lake there, not doing drugs or anything. He made a point of saying that. There was just two boys and two girls, and two of them were, being necking. All right? And the two in front weren't. They were just friends, and it was all very awkward. And suddenly this USO rises up and hits their boat. And they're freaking out because it's much bigger than their boat. They've got a little speedboat there, about 12 feet across. This object is 20 feet, maybe 25. It's circular, perfectly circular. It's black and has a little dome on top, and they can't identify it. So the girls are screaming, "Get out! Let's go!" And finally, guy I interviewed, he's driving. He grabs the accelerator and tries to take off, and the boat won't move. It's lodged to this thing. It's stuck to it until suddenly, next thing they know, the object's gone. It's 2 hours later. They're on a different part of the lake. The boat's skipping along at top speed. Almost hit a pole there. They slowed down, rushed home. The parents were furious, didn't want to hear any excuses, and sent the boys home.
Why were the parents upset about what?
The kids were 2-3 hours late.
Oh, I see. Oh, they were okay. So the tardiness aspect is what annoyed them. Was the boat? Well, I guess the speedboat would be metal. I'm wondering if the craft below may have had some sort of electromagnetism as part of its propulsion or force field, and may have what got them stuck for a minute, and they're like, it's like being stuck on a rock or something, and the poor UFOnauts underneath had to just zap them, and so they'll sleep and not remember this while we get them off.
I don't think so. I think they came out in the lake not knowing that something was hiding beneath them, which nabbed them, took them.
Oh, okay.
They had missing time. It's clear cut. He had sinus problems all following this. Never had any dreams, but really had an obsession with it, and really feels like something happened. The other three quickly moved out of town. He, much years later, got in touch with them and talked to them. One has died, but they all remember it.
Wow.
Now, if anybody has questions, you can private chat them to H. Foister, Ceiling Cat, and we will get those questions answered for you. And if you're somewhere else and you got a question, send it to theparanormalview@gmail.com. Just put attention question, and we will get those answered also. Great little show tonight. Lots of good stories. I think
there was one off the East Coast. Oh my God, I've got to tell you this one.
Okay.
Because it involves a submarine and a Navy guy. I've talked to a lot of Navy people, and I talked to a Navy navigator, a guy who navigated submarines. I talked to a Coast Guard captain. I've talked to another Navy officer. This guy that I talked to, his name is Ray Sachs, and he was an electrician's mate on the USS Clamagore. Now, the Clamagore was not nuclear powered, but it carried nuclear torpedoes. And he had been on other submarines, Ray had, and nothing happened. He gets on the Clamagore, and weird things started to happen. And at one point, the engines shut down for no reason. Can't happen. There's multiple backups. They could not figure it out. But what the weirdest thing that happened, occurred in 1971, I believe is the year. He's heading up the north coast of the eastern United States. And they're off the shore there. They're traveling at 12 knots on the surface. He's on lookout. There's another officer on lookout. The captain's there, second in command. And it's at night when this object comes underwater, this glowing light, zooming up to their submarine at about 80 knots, like freeway speed, really fast, right up from the stern, and starts pacing their submarine for the next 15 minutes or so. Stayed right next to their submarine. Ray's looking at it. He says it was about 50 feet off there, maybe about 20, 50 feet deep, 50 feet wide. It's really hard to tell. It was very bright, totally silent. Everyone's freaking out. The captain calls the sonar, actually turns to Ray and says, what do the sonar people say? And they're not reading anything. The sonar is not picking this up at all. So they don't know what this is. And it causes, panic on the ship, basically. And one by one, all the leading officers go up on deck to check this thing out. One by one, they come out, look at this thing, kind of go, and go back. And the next one comes up and can't identify it. Nobody can. And they're just watching this thing for a while. Ray is talking with the other lookout like crazy. He's like, oh, my God, look at it. It's silent. What's it doing? What could it be? And finally, this thing just moves off. And the second in command turns to the captain and says, "Captain, how do you want me to record this in the log?" The captain turns to him and says, "Officers who record this sort of thing do not move up in rank." So it was not recorded. Basically,
Wow.
not officially. And the second in command turns to Ray and the other guy and says, "Stop talking and don't tell anyone." and needless to say, they go below deck, and every crewman there rushes them and says, "What happened?" Because it's it's a buzz on the ship. They already know that something tracked the submarine. So of course he tells them, and it was this amazing USO sighting. And I don't know. I mean, I have to believe the commander of that submarine did report this to his superiors. Otherwise, why is he there? I mean, what is he doing? That's his job. But I don't know. Officially, it was not recorded.
Oh, he could have recorded nothing happened at this time. Absolutely nothing.
I mean, it's insane.
Well, I think we'll take us our last little break. We'll make it a quick one also. When we come back, we got lots more to talk about with this book. And if you do have questions, please send them in. We will get those answered for you. So, Jeff, you want to take us out?
Yep. Yeah, well, you're listening to the Paranormal View on para-x.com with hosts Henry Foister, Ceiling Cat Barbara Duncan, and myself, Geoffrey Gould, with tonight's recurring and always compelling guest author and ufologist Preston Dennett. So stay tuned for more of the Paranormal View after the break.
Para-X Radio, programming for the open mind.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Paranormal View right here on the Parax Radio Network. I want to thank everybody again for being with us tonight. Hope you're enjoying the show. We got with us Geoffrey Gould.
Hello, hello.
And Barbara Duncan.
Howdy, folks.
And I want to welcome back our guest, Preston Dennett.
Hey.
All right. There's a lot of good stories and information in this book, and I want to remind everybody that we will let you know how you can get a copy of it, Undersea UFO Base by Preston Dennett, and we'll do that toward the end of the show. So everybody, if you'd like to get a copy and have it and read it, there's a lot more in the book than what we're going to be able to go over with tonight because we just don't have the time because there is so much of it. There is another story in there that I thought was really interesting, and this happened to some people on a beach, and it's called Contact at Leo Carrillo, and it was a very interesting story also. And the thing about these is you have more than just one or two people who witnesses all this. So yeah, and I'm pretty sure that you probably interviewed quite a few of the people.
No, I wish. I've gotten confirmation from some of them, but so far there's only one main witness. But yeah, it did involve a large number of people. Often people are very reluctant to speak on the subject. And I can't push too hard because I've learned the hard way what happens. You have to respect a person's right to remain silent. And but yeah, one guy was compelled to talk to me because he knew of my research, found out about it, and was amazed because he had this incredible encounter in 1998. He was at a party which was being thrown on Leo Carrillo Beach. It's right along the coast there. It's right where all this activity is taking place. And this was a large party, 50 people or so at night. And it's a little isolated beach there. It's far away from the Pacific Coast Highway, which is right above them on top of some cliffs. So the party goes on, it's some point in the evening, he wanders down to the beach. This is towards the end of the party. Everyone's winding down. And they're looking at these lights on the water, a small group of people. And I'm talking to this guy, I'll call him Dan. And he is like, "What are those lights?" And they're like, "We don't know." And he's looking at them. It doesn't look like a cruise ship, but it's a bunch of colored lights in kind of this random pattern. And nothing conventional looking at all. And I'm thinking, could this be an oil rig? What's going on? suddenly they see this little light dart off of it to the side. I'm like, wow, that was weird, and it went pretty fast. So now they're getting even more confused about what they're looking at. And most of the people in the party don't see it or aren't paying attention to it. Just a small group of people, less than a dozen. When suddenly this very bright light shines from behind them, from at the top of the cliffs, shining down, or towards the USOs, actually. And Dan and everyone rolls around and looks up these lights. They're like stadium lights. They're just huge. It couldn't be a car or anything like this. There's just a field up there. And the lights switch off, and suddenly there's these figures coming down the staircase. It was a group of about maybe a dozen people, a little less, men and women, all wearing blue jumpsuits, or what appeared to be like blue jumpsuits. And it was strange. There was a number of strange things. First of all, this group of 10 people in blue jumpsuits invades the party. Second of all, no one seems to be reacting to them. These figures kind of break apart and go in small pairs and start examining people, just looking at them and not saying anything. And it's all just really weird. Suddenly, they all looked the same, for one thing. Were dark complected, maybe Mesoamerican, Peruvian, Mexican. It was hard to say, but maybe not short, 5.5 feet, maybe. And they looked so similar. It could have been brothers and sisters. And just didn't say anything. He saw something in their hands which was kind of blinking lights, and he's trying to, could that be a flashlight? Is that a beer? What's going on? He can't figure it out. He looks up, and there's one of them on top of the lighthouse there, which is all well and good, except you can't get up there. It's locked, and there's a fence around it, and it's not easy to just climb it. It's not really, something that's easily doable. But this figure is up on top of it, and it's signaling the USO, which is still there, by the way. And this is when it just goes from bizarre to just, they had missing time. Next thing they know, it's later in the evening. Dan is now standing in a row of other people facing the water, and the USOs are gone. It's much later. There's 10 people standing behind him in a row. They look down at their feet. There's no footprints. There's nothing there except this imprint in the sand, a round circle of imprinted sand, like you stuck a glass or something in the water, like they'd been teleported there or something. A number of the people who do remember this part of the incident, but most don't. Most of the people remember nothing weird about this incident. They don't remember any entities. They remember nothing like this. After, at this point, the party did break up and everyone went home, and this incident was not discussed for years. It just wasn't. So, it's a weird incident for sure. The witness I talked to has had encounters his whole life. He remembers, quite a bit of this. He feels certain that they were ETs. He's had a number of encounters with them. And he had sort of flashbacks to the incident in which he remembered being taken on board, presumably one of these craft, because he saw metallic walls and it was very large. Hard to say for sure. He hasn't gone under hypnosis or anything like that, but felt compelled to report his story.
Now, do you find that abductees have a tendency to know when another person is also an abductee? Like it's sort of a non-communicative but sort of way of knowing?
I think
like almost a mental connection, you mean? Or?
Yeah, like a mental connection, yeah.
Well, what we have is people like recognizing each other and like, do I know you? And they can't place it. And they may later have a UFO encounter together. That's relatively rare.
That's how I know you.
Right. And there's some evidence that people's lives, their relationships are manipulated to a certain extent where they're brought together, perhaps on board a craft as children, even from varying locations.
Oh, great. They're from the planet Cupid.
Right. And they're setting people up.
Did you ever watch, there was a TV show, I don't know if it's going to have another season, called Children of Earth?
I'm not sure that I have.
It's a sitcom done with sort of dark overtones about a group of people who are throughout their lives abducted by extraterrestrials, and they end up forming a support group. And it isn't until well into the second, I think maybe third season, where they suddenly realize how long they've been abducted, and they've been being abducted at the same time. So that as their regression started,
Right.
They start realizing, oh wow, we were on the ship together.
Yeah, I did watch that. I watched every episode.
Yeah, I love Frank. He's Frank the Gray Alien.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a terrific show, I got to be honest, but I really enjoyed some of the accurate portrayals.
That's what blew me away.
And yeah, it was funny, and it was really interesting because they were able to put in some of the real details. You know, that's why science fiction does that. Science fiction kind of predicts some of the stuff, and I think it helps people to sort of deal with it. Before I became a UFO investigator, I wanted to be a science fiction writer, and was not able to do it actually. Just kind of, you know what, I'm going to write about aliens anyway because I found out UFOs were real.
And truth is stranger than fiction.
Right? But I'm back in it, by the way, science fiction, because I think it's important and a lot of people resonate with it. It outsells UFOs by quite a margin. And I'm trying to bring the science fiction fans into the whole UFO fold. I recently won the Writers of the Future contest. So I want to give them a shout out because I promised I would.
And what was your story about?
Not allowed to say.
Hasn't printed yet, or?
Yeah, there's a series of volumes they put out. It's the longest running science fiction contest, I think, in the world, and awards first, second, and third prize. Big prize money. I got my check already for $750 for second place. I'm thrilled because I've entered 47 times. It's totally anonymous, and you just enter your short story. Anyone can enter as long as you're an amateur, science fiction writer.
Yeah.
And I published a few stories, but nothing a couple at a pro level. But
and the name of the competition is what again? Writers
of the Future.
Writers. And is that also the name of the group, or just the competition?
Well, it's not. It's sort of just a contest, actually.
Yeah, but somebody's got to run it.
Oh yeah. That's what they call themselves. Yep, the Writers of the Future.
So, there you go.
And I'm just thrilled to death, and my story is coming out next year. And I will say, it does have. Well, I really can't say anything about it. I don't want to get in trouble.
But it's a short story. You can say it's a short story, or
yeah, it's a short story and science fiction. And when it's published, I could certainly talk about it. But I've always felt that these subjects are very close together. And certainly, aliens is the most popular trope, I guess, theme in science fiction. And I'm still mostly into this UFO stuff because finding out it's real. I mean, come on.
Yeah, really.
Well, now you've been in contact with people in the military too, and I guess you was able to get some of them to tell their stories on stuff that happened with them. In April 1966, there was a Navy photographer who was filming Catalina Island, and he photographed a UFO. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's a great case. I didn't have the opportunity to interview the witnesses in this one, but it's a well-known classic case. It appeared on Brandon Chase's documentary UFOs Are Real, and some great UFO footage. This group of Navy people, one of them was a Navy photographer, very familiar with all kinds of aircraft, noticed this object hovering over the island. It's like, that's weird, it's not even moving. And he's looking at it and sees no wings, and it starts to move. And that's when he grabs his camera, his movie camera, and is able to take a good segment of footage there of this object leisurely moving over the island. It's not super high quality, so there's some doubters out there. It's not what I would call conclusive proof, but together with the testimony of these military guys, it's fantastic evidence that something was out there because they couldn't identify it, and there it is on film. So, very interesting case. Don't know what to make of it other than here we go again, in this one area. My two main data points are, all these accounts of objects coming in and out of the water, and multiple objects. But I've got other data points that point to the existence of there being an undersea base, and that, in one case, it involves people who've been taken into these UFOs, and they're not taken actually into the UFOs, they're taken underground. And it's not just, it's a couple of cases, but not a lot. But like one involving a pilot and actually a doctor is his main job, but he's also a pilot and a private pilot. His wife is a doctor, and he had a missing time experience as a child on Catalina Island, and later had UFO sightings and just realized he was showing all the markers of an abductee, so he decided to go under hypnosis to investigate this missing time incident on Catalina Island. He was with his friend on a boat in Avalon Harbor. Next thing he knows, it's morning. But under hypnosis, he recalls being taken into an underground area. So it wasn't taken into a UFO. It appeared to be this vast underground cavern. It had rock-like walls, smooth floor. His friend was taken off to another area while he was placed on a bench and told to just wait there. He felt no real fear. He just watched this kind of not a gray, but more like a praying mantis type ET wearing a white sort of robe-like thing. And after some point, the experience ended. But he's not the only one to be taken. There was another lady, a photographer. She wrote a book about her experiences called Beyond My Wildest Dreams. And she had an experience where she lived along the coast there on Malibu, where she was taken into what appears to be an underground area, like an auditorium, vast, with lots of people in it, other types of ETs, multiple types. And I've got another story beyond that. So that's another data point. And these started to build up. There's this other thing called the Malibu anomaly. Now, we haven't talked about that at all, but that's another data point. And I started to get whistleblowers, people who said there's a tunnel. So, things started to really build up.
So you're talking about a large underground cavern, say, somewhere near Santa Barbara, Catalina, that area.
Yeah, it went viral on the internet not too long ago. Years after I had started investigating this area and plotting all the little, I made a map. I put it in the book.
But not underwater. But it's something that humans could, function and not drown.
No, it's underwater. There's underwater tunnel or anomaly. It's known as the Malibu anomaly now. Mm-hmm. And it's all over the internet, and it looks like this tunnel with pillars and a flat top. But some Google images, this was found through Google applications, some don't show it. Some show just a landslide. It's a known earthquake fault area. Skeptics say, nope, nothing there. But I've gotten 3 or 4 people from separate areas telling me there's a tunnel there, and that was before this came out. And this thing shows a tunnel. Some of the images do. And it's right exactly in the thickest part of where I plotted all these USOs and UFOs. I made different maps. And that's right in the thick of it. So
how deep is it there?
It's pretty deep. Yeah, the show Location with Rob Lowe actually went down and explored it. He was exploring, Bigfoot and ghosts and haunted places, and explored the Malibu anomaly with a submersible and went and checked it out. Found no evidence that it was artificially constructed, but it was really a shoestring investigation done very quickly, more for ratings than anything. They saw the top and they examined part of the bottom, but didn't do any real exploration of it. I'm on the fence about it. It could be a natural formation. I don't know. I just recently heard more information on it. This isn't in the book. One of the witnesses to all this activity didn't see it directly, but knows about it is Merrill Fankhauser. He wrote the song Wipeout, and was invited to go watch these lights coming in and out of the water, and kind of just didn't do it. Didn't think much of it until he heard about all this activity. Later found out that there were mysterious radio signals coming from the Malibu anomaly area. He recorded them and put them in his, I mean, he didn't record them, someone else did, but he put them in his song and has been playing it, and very successfully. That they sound just like, other UFO sounds. But at any rate, he was in Las Vegas not too long ago, Merrill Fankhauser, and performing, and a Chumash Indian elder approached him. Now, the Chumash Native Americans lived in this area for thousands of years. And the Chumash told him that they know about the Malibu anomaly, and that over 1,000 years ago, many thousands of years ago, the ocean level was much lower, and they would actually be able to sit on top of this thing and fish off of it. And they said it was constructed by someone long before them. So, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence, but right now I'm leaning in the direction that this is a construct of some kind. I have to admit, when you look at it, the pillars are not uniform. They look like they could be natural. The top is very flat. And I have to say, it looks like there's a tunnel there in some of these images and some not. And I just don't see how you can choose one image over another and be objective about it.
Well, do you think...
also the possibility is the architects, if they were alien, may not deal with the same kind of abstracts of symmetry that we have.
Right.
A human duck blind.
Yeah, exactly. I actually saw the Low Files episode with the Malibu anomaly where they were going under, and they were like, he was just freaking out over the sonar, pointing out, like, see, it's really weird, So.
Yeah, I mean, and I got some whistleblowers who were telling me about this tunnel. They're like, you know about this tunnel? And I'm like, no, tell me about it. They said that there's a tunnel that stretches, get this, from Area 51 in Nevada, where Area 51 is, where we reverse engineer all this stuff, allegedly, to Edwards Air Force Base, which, by the way, is neck deep in UFOs. There's reports it goes 50 stories down, reports of aliens working with humans, UFOs landing there, as affirmed by Gordon Cooper, our astronaut. Reverse engineering. I mean, that's where President Eisenhower allegedly met with ETs. So it's, very ET-oriented. The tunnel leads from Area 51 to there, all the way to, they wouldn't tell me exactly where, but the San Pedro, Santa Catalina Channel area. So I'm like, and when I got a second report, I'm like, wow, there we go again. These guys probably don't know each other. Maybe they do. I don't know. But I got a number of reports, and I'm like, okay. And then these images come out, and I'm like, wow. All right. How many data points do you need to say there is a strong possibility that there's some sort of base down there? And I have to tell you, there is one whistleblower who just laid it out. Said, yep, there's a base. She's a lady who worked with the Navy for many years, and she says the only reason she can talk, I didn't talk to her personally, this was a report I found secondhand. She said, the only reason I can talk about this is because it's already on the internet. It's already all over the internet. And you're welcome, by the way, because that's partly to me putting this information out. She said flat out, yeah, there's a base down there, and it's actually run by humans, but aliens visit it regularly.
Well, couldn't they put buoys out there in the water, like for radio frequency tracking, any UFOs or USOs that might be going in and out of there?
They've got to be aware of it. I'm not sure. I think they're just kind of standing by and watching it or working with them to some point. It's very hard for me to say how the military is dealing with this, because a lot of the witnesses themselves are military and they don't know anything about it. So it's being covered up, certainly to very high levels. I mean, one guy, the people I'm talking to are high-level military people in some cases.
Yeah, I think
they would know.
Yeah, some of them's been killed for knowing stuff like that and wanted to go public, I guess. You got a one here, and Jeff, how long you been out in California?
Since about 1998 or 9.
Okay. In October 19th, 2002, there was a UFO that was over the Queen Mary. Did you guys know about that?
Well, that's down in Long Beach. It's not exactly in eyesight of where I am.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I've been there. It's a very popular tourist spot, and one lady went there just to see the Queen Mary. There's restaurants, it's a hotel.
Yep.
And they step out, and there's like 5 little flying saucers in a circle up right above them, multicolored lights, beautiful, completely freaks her out because it's so classic. I mean, it's just undeniable.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's right off the coast there. I mean, LAX airport is on the coast here. Airports do attract UFOs. It's not, I mean, it's a thing for sure. There's a number of airport cases involving UFOs around the world, and LAX has got to be at the top of the list. I mean, there was an incident back in the 50s where UFOs were seen in full view of the control tower for like 3 days in a row. And pretty regularly throughout the years, there'll be this massive sighting over LAX, which is right on the coast there, right smack, looking over all of this. So yeah,
well, I've been to the Queen Mary, and I stayed there for a weekend for a paranormal conference and got my first, actually, so far only EVP down in the pool area. But the idea of UFOs is I had never even considered that. Although you go up on the deck and there's magnificent views, and you can see all over the place. But I've never thought of like UFOs just hanging out. Like, wasn't there a ship in the war once, or whatever?
Yeah. Well, locally, this activity is pretty well known, I think. There's been a lot of people who have photographed it or videotaped it. I put a number of photographs in the book. So you can see, I mean, people aren't just sitting around going and pointing. In some cases, they have successfully filmed them. There was one case where they tried. We haven't talked about that one. It's a huge case. This occurred not too long ago. I believe it was like 2014, maybe 2016, in the end of June. And it was like June 26th. And a group of Boy Scouts again saw what amounted to 200 objects darting around in the sky. Tried to photograph it, couldn't. Their cell phones wouldn't work. Again, no one's talking about it. They watched this for over an hour, multiple objects of different kinds, coming, in some cases down into the water or coming out, sometimes splitting up into multiple objects, different shapes of objects as well. Some of them came quite close to them, and they saw little domes on it and colored lights. And it went on for quite some time. They're all, ooh, ah, what's going on? Really freaked them out, to say the least. And I don't know. Finally, it just suddenly ended. But a really interesting case took place on the northern end of Catalina Island.
Now, it's interesting that there has been lots of sightings at different times from the Pacific Coast Highway, all up and down it. I guess that runs right close to the ocean there, where they can see everything going on down that way.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't drive maybe 5 miles without running into. I could document one sighting every couple of miles there. I could pull over and say, well, this is what happened here, and this is what happened here. Because, it winds right along the coast there. They should call it the extraterrestrial highway, honestly, because if you want to see one of these things, go down this road. I've got abduction cases out of this road, a couple of them. So absolutely, every couple of miles. I still remember one. These guys one's a military witness. The other is a pool cleaner who also moonlights as operating lasers for special effects. And they're driving down the highway. This is an afternoon. Pacific Coast Highway, near Malibu, and they see what look like these objects right over the water. They're black and they're diamond shape and shiny and darting around. And they're like, wow, that's really strange. And when they darted very quickly south, along the coast. They followed them and knew that these were definitely unusual. They finally lost track of them, and as they're driving around trying to find them, they drove up into the canyon, up towards Latigo, and saw people just sitting out there on the lawn chairs, as very much like the movie Close Encounters. And they were just watching the show, I guess. This is true. I've heard about this in other cases. People used to go down to this beach in the 50s and 60s and just watch these things coming up and out of the water. Robert Stanley, he's a famous researcher who was really the first to sort of recognize this is a hot spot. But all the researchers know about it. Ann Druffel, Bill Hamilton, Yvonne Smith, they all know about it. Barbara Lamb.
Uh-oh.
Wow. No, we're here.
I thought I lost somebody.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Talking about a sudden sentence.
Now let's talk a little bit about Mount Shasta, because that also has Shasta Lake in it, and I know that it's also a UFO hotspot for UFOs. What about USOs?
I didn't really look into that. I have to tell you, I do know that of other lakes where I got reports from. I know about Mount Shasta certainly that it's the alleged home of Lemurians, and that there's a number of pretty well testified cases of people who've gone into Mount Shasta and seen incredible stuff. And it's full of Bigfoot accounts. It's full of UFO accounts. So yeah, it's a really magical area. It's a huge spiritual mecca and attracts people of different spiritual disciplines from across the world. And something very strange going on there. But as far as
And a lot of caverns, too.
Right. As far as USOs, I haven't really looked into that particular area. I got another case in Lake Florida, another guy who saw a USO off in the Bahamas, another who saw USOs, a Coast Guard captain, saw USOs off the coast of Haiti, I believe it was, or in that Dominican Republic area, somewhere around, I'm not exactly sure, I'd have to look that one up. But yeah, they're all over the world. Absolutely. Even in tiny little bodies of water, there's a number of reservoirs in upstate New York, man-made reservoirs, and USOs have been seen coming out of there. There's a little reservoir called Lake Casitas. Well, it's not little, it's pretty big. On the northern end of all this activity, it's right off the coast at the northern end. It's an artificial reservoir, and it has this amazing USO account where the guy was actually able to see this object come out of the water and saw a window and saw a humanoid standing there looking at him. He grabs his camera, and this thing zips off, but he still manages to capture it as it zips away. It's a great case. So yeah, you never know what's under these little puddles of water sometimes. It's like stepping in a puddle, and suddenly, no, it's a foot deep. No, there's a UFO in it.
We have on Thomas Wortman quite a bit, who is the MUFON director of Ohio, and he says that there's reports, or a lot of people think that there's USOs up there in the lake up there. Where they go in and out of the water. Doesn't know if there's a base underneath or not, but there is USOs up there.
Yeah, some reason they're attracted to water. I'm trying to figure it out. There's a couple of cases where people have seen USOs, not a lot, but actually, sucking up the water, or apparently taking the water. And there's some people who've speculated. And I can't really find any confirmation of this other than what appears to be speculation, that UFOs use water as a fuel source in some respect, which I suppose is a definite possibility. But I'm guessing, because people have seen these objects going in and out of the land. They can move through solid objects in certain cases, going through trees, and not. So they've got this technology that pushes away matter or folds it, or I don't know, but they're doing stuff we can't do. And their ability to go under the waters, like I said, like a great place to hide. I'm thinking that's the primary motivation. I don't know. I'm only speculating, but there has been a lot of.
Well, it would make sense because we don't explore the oceans that much.
Exactly.
They can hide really well.
We still have lots of mysteries to discover. I was just watching a show on TV the other day. Giant species of sharks are still being discovered, and whales, and big animals. And I should mention that there are a number of cases of sea serpents off the Southern California coast. And I'm talking 20 cases, 30, and some very well testified by large groups of people who saw, giant sea serpents with horse-like heads and horns and so on. Not a whole lot of recent cases, but back in the 50s and earlier, there was a lot of them.
Now, do you think the ones that are in the ships going under the water are, I'd say, like human in a sense, or do you think that they are more of a robotic type?
I think there are some cases where what people are saying are probes. I do have one case. I wasn't able to do a formal interview with the guy, but he was scuba diving in this area and had one of these objects come zooming up to him, and it was small. It was just maybe like smaller than a basketball, certainly, like a softball. A glowing light came, examined him, and darted away. So how do you explain that? There's clearly nobody inside it, right? It's too small. So I think some of them are what amount to alien drones. But for the most part, no, I'm thinking these are craft, because this is what people are describing. They match the description of UFOs, except they're underwater.
So how big are most of these? Big enough for one or two people, or are they big enough to carry 40 or 50?
There's that one giant case of stadium size. I always wonder about this, because there are some cases of enormous craft, like the Phoenix Lights, that giant triangular craft that moved over Phoenix back in 1996. That could probably hold, the entire population of Phoenix. It was a mile long and huge. So some of these objects could hold just entire cities of people. And I wonder about the fact that there's many mother ships reported. On June 14th, 1992, one of the accounts did involve a mother ship. A gentleman was driving south down the boulevard and looked up and saw this giant craft, and it was surrounded by 20 others. Actually, there's two reports, the guy down by the beach. So I'm guessing they could hold a couple of hundred of these craft at the very least. So maybe, that's where these large numbers of craft are coming from. Robert Stanley has speculated there's a wormhole and that there's no need for a base. But I'm thinking there's a base because the activity is so regular in this area, coming in and out of the water. It would be so convenient for them and so easy to do. And people have said there's a base, so.
Now, with all the activity with UFOs and all the different species of aliens doing things here on Earth, wouldn't it be beneficial for them to be in contact with all the governments to where they can get the planet straightened out for their benefit also?
Yeah, it's a bit of an enigma here because it's hard to say what's going on. They have the ability, certainly, to take over our planet and run things. I think they could do that very easily, and they haven't done that. They have the ability to cure people of all manners of diseases, and it's only being done on a very limited basis. There's horrible tragedies happening all the time, and they're not preventing them. Not in every case. I've got a number of cases where they have prevented tragedies and helped people in a number of different ways and healed people. But yeah, it's all very limited. There seems to be sort of a slow campaign on the ET's part to reveal their presence. And move towards open official contact. But that is absolutely not going to happen until we, stop fighting among ourselves, stop polluting our planet, stop having hiding the subject, covering it all up. It's all very hard to explain, and I think some of the ETs have different agendas. One thing I do know is this is a real phenomenon. There's absolutely no doubt that UFOs are real. They're here, and they're not going away. The evidence is within the public arena. It's not just eyewitness testimonies and photographs. There's thousands of landing trace cases. There's metal fragment cases. There's medical evidence, injuries and healings. There's electromagnetic cases. There's animal evidence. I mean, the evidence goes on and on. The implant removal evidence is kind of the smoking gun at this point. I've been involved peripherally with some of that. Certainly have written about it. So, yeah, I mean, the evidence is out there.
I got a question from the dark side of the moon in the chat room. Can UFOs change shape and size?
Yes. When it comes to UFOs, size does not matter. There was this one account, first chapter of my book, Inside UFOs, is about this Navy corpsman, a medic, who was taken aboard a UFO and saw praying mantis type ETs, 15 foot tall, by the way. And he said it was very strange. At some point, the room would actually change size. I'm like, really? Because I had just talked to another abductee, Bill Foster. He wrote a book called The Black Triangle Abduction. And he noticed the same thing, At some point, it was so confusing, he actually asked the gray type ETs, who he was pretty friendly with. He had a lot of encounters and was on a, talking basis with them, and was able to hold long conversations and asked them, why does the ship keep changing? What's going on? How big is this craft? He finally just asked them, and they said, it's as big as we need it to be. They can change the size of it. And I wrote about this in my book, Not From Here, where there's this one case, Leonard Stringfield, the crash retrieval expert, interviewed a Navy guy who was a photographer taken to see a crashed UFO, or a recovered one. It was in a military base, recovered. It was about 30 feet across, and he photographed it from the outside. And they said, okay, photograph the inside. He goes inside, and it's not 30 feet across on the inside. It's much bigger. It's huge. You couldn't throw a rock and hit the other side. So this explains how they are able to do, what appears to be time travel in some cases. If they can control space to that extent.
Well, in science fiction, specifically Doctor Who, it's called transcendental dimensionalism, where the inside is bigger than the outside.
Exactly. I mean, science fiction predicted a lot of this stuff, and here it is actually real. I mean, absolutely real. This is a Navy photographer reporting this. And there's a number of cases, for that matter, where people will see a ball of light. And they're like, well, and suddenly it expands, grows, and it's a full-on UFO. Betty Andreasen saw a UFO abduct a person. She was taken to an abduction scene, watched the guy go on board the UFO. The UFO shrunk down to a tiny little thing, a ball of light, and took off. And they turned to her and like, we call that deopulating, when they shrink things. So don't know what that means. It's not a real word.
Means they're probably going to get preview tickets for Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Exactly. But their technology, guys, it's like magic. It's unbelievable.
Well, even Arthur C. Clarke said that science is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah, I've heard that the guys at Area 51 said, you wouldn't believe what we got. Science fiction isn't even close.
Well, our time has just zipped right on by. And
yeah, we're missing time.
Yeah, time. Well, I do want to thank Preston for coming on, being with us tonight. Hope everybody's enjoyed the show. Barbara, you got one last quick question here for Preston?
Oh, I have hundreds of questions. So if you bottom line it, do you think that these USOs are more aquatic in nature and want to adapt that way, or do you think that they're more air-breathing, such as humans are?
I think they're probably air-breathing. I'm a big believer we're dealing with extraterrestrials very much like us, though I have heard of aquatic cases, but it's pretty rare. So I'm thinking by and large, yeah, we're dealing with people who are like us in most ways, but are from elsewhere. I mean, not from here.
Wow. Well, go ahead, Barbara.
Well, it's interesting. Just depends on how deep, I guess, some of these things go, which is why they're so interested in. Are they interested in us, or are they interested in the water?
Both. I'm mostly us, but they've got multiple agendas. I mean, I've got cases where UFOs are hovering over mines, iron mines, copper mines, uranium mines, diamond mines. It's definitely a thing. There's a number of cases where
Resource.
right, they're taking our metals. It's pretty clear. I mean, they're affecting the ground in some of these cases. The uranium that was dug up was deactivated. It was gone. So they took it, basically. That happened in Carn City, Texas. And lots of copper mines in Arizona. And UFOs are right over them all the time. So they hover over graveyards. That's another weird thing. They are very interested mostly in us. They have three main messages for people. One is stop polluting. Stop your warlike ways. If you continue this, you will self-destruct. That is their number one message, and it's been the same message no matter what ET you talk to or when. And their second message would be alternative energy. They take people to the engine room after examining them and say, this is how we do it. Why don't you do it this way? Here's how you do it. Pretty darn common.
Wow.
And thirdly, and this is what I'm hearing from the people themselves, they're given messages of a spiritual nature in some aspect. They're told how to do alternative healing. That's pretty darn common. They come away from their experience doing water dowsing or hands-on healing or channeling or giving psychic readings, this sort of thing, doing past life regressions or having astral travel, out-of-body experiences, which is another huge subject I'm all about. But so that's their main messages. I think they're mostly interested in us and in saving our planet.
Well, Preston, our time is dwindling down. Why don't you quickly give information out where people can get your books, how they can follow you on the media, Facebook, and your sites?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. And thanks again for having me on the show. But yeah, you can reach me on Facebook. I do have a website. If you just Google my name, it'll take you there. All my books are there. I've got, all excerpts. You can buy my books through my website. You can contact me through my website. I always love hearing from people, whether, it's a question or a comment or if they've got a story to share. I've got more upcoming books too. I'm putting out volume 3 of Volume 3 of Not From Here, another volume of UFO healings, putting out a number of science fiction stories. Again, just one second place in the Writers of the Future. Woohoo! So yeah, lots of stuff going on. I'm just really thankful that you guys had me on the show, and I really appreciate it.
All right. Yeah. We want you to stay on for a few minutes. We're off, and we'll talk with you for just a couple of minutes. Jeff, you got to go.
Yes. Facebook.com/The Paranormal View, all one word. The official site is theparanormalview.com. You can follow me on Twitter and on Instagram @RealBadger. And on the report that I'm doing up for tonight's show, apart from tons of his titles and how to find them on Amazon, we have the link to his writer page.
Good night. You've been listening to The Paranormal View on the ParaX Radio Network. Join us again next week at the same time for more of The Paranormal View.